don't know what happened there. Recording stopped. Where were we? So, he pressed the button for the bullpen. So you see, the engine rewrites the physics of your particular pocket of existence. It hears what you want and reprograms the code accordingly, granting you any wish. And the only price you have to pay is your soul, said Marlowe. Seth grinned. Yes, once upon a time that was true. For our friends, the knights. Originally you would have had to part with that piece of you, the very essence of your being. It was inevitable. There was no way you could crack your contract. But why, Marlowe asked? What can a soul do? Why is it worth anything? Who knows? I certainly don't. Not one scientist on the planet could explain the nature of the soul, but few could deny we have one. It is one of the mysteries of the human condition. Perhaps one day we will unlock it. The elevator grumbled to a stop, and Seth heaved open the gate, walking into the bullpen. Two of the lawyers were still there. One of them startled out of sleep when he heard Seth's voice. He jumped to his feet, slapping his face gently to wake himself up. He was a young guy, 20s maybe, and his messy hair and Halo t-shirt made him look more like a surfer than a lawyer. Yo, he said. I wasn't sleeping, honest, just resting my eyes. And practising his nocturnal flatulence, said the woman. She was a senior by at least a decade, dressed like an old-fashioned librarian. She peered over her glasses at Marlowe. I take it we're repairing some rookie mistake? Yes, Annie, we had an unfortunate wish, didn't we, Marlowe? Seth said, still smiling. A certain unrequited desire. You wished for the dish, said the guy. Happens all the time. He moved across the room to a storage locker and pulled on a pair of gloves and a helmet, connected to each other with wires. He chucked it to the woman and called Annie, who just managed to snatch it out of the air. Tim, I really wish you would treat our equipment with such... Really wish you wouldn't treat our equipment with such disregard, said Seth. You do know how expensive it is, don't you? Sorry, boss, he replied, donning a pair of gloves of his own and pulling the helmet over his head. It looked like a virtual reality set or something Daft Punk might wear. This is quite something, Seth said, pulling Marlowe to the edge of the room. Tim snapped his fingers, and the huge bank of computers along one side of the room roared to life, a noise like the pounding rush of a waterfall. He clicked his fingers again. We need section 808 FR 403.2, he said. Correction, said Annie. 408.2. Whatever, muttered Tim. He waved his hand like he was a cop guiding traffic. Lights embedded in the walls blazed to life, beaming out lines of white laser as delicate as cobwebs, hundreds of them. They converged in the huge empty space in the middle of the room, taking on the shape of cogs and pistons, chains and gears and levers. It looked like a phantom version of the inside of the engine, and it took Marlowe's breath away. Tim moved his hands again, and the entire hologram shifted, pushed across the room, new sections appearing as the old ones vanished into the wall. It is an exact simulation of the engine, whispered Seth. Well, the parts of it that we have documented. This section here, as far as we can tell, deals with what we shall call affairs of the heart. We may have a slight irregularity in the 8th quadrant, said Tim, spreading apart his hands and causing the hologram to enlarge. He zoomed in some more, and Marlowe saw a series of pins lined up together, some raised, some lowered. They reminded him of the arms and needles of a record player. Each one contained a small vial filled with a drop of dark liquid, swimming with flecks of light. 4 and 5, said Tim. No, replied Annie. I don't think so. Go north. He swiped his hands and the floor moved, the hologram passing through Marlowe, making him feel giddy. He ran his hands through the light, seeing it dance on his skin, wondering how on earth somebody had managed to think this up. There, said Annie, pointing to a clutch of coiled springs, more needles attached to them. 6, 7, 8. The 9th point has shifted. Good spot, said Tim. What are they doing? Marlowe whispered, not wanting to disturb them. Seth leaned in, speaking quietly. The engine uses these filaments to write your contract. There are millions of them, billions, each one as small as a hair on your head. We're not sure how, but they have the power to rewrite the code, reprogram the universe. When they do, they change position, like that. But how the hell do you know if they have? Marlowe asked. There are so many of them. Our computers pick up some discrepancies, said Seth, but the computer isn't as sharp as the human mind. These guys are genii, photographic memories. They can identify when something in the machine has changed, and when they do, they reset it. They cancel the contract. Like lawyers, Marlowe said, nodding. Oh, come on, said Annie, genuinely irritated. Not you too. We're not lawyers. We're quantum mathematicians. There's a big, big difference. Oh, sorry, said Marlowe, watching as she walked through the hologram towards the area they were discussing. She reached down, touching one of the filaments with her glove. Definitely the 9th, she said. Confirm? Confirmed, said Tim. This is section 808-FR-408.2, subsection 14, and filament 9. You ready? I was born ready, Annie said. She plucked the filament like it was a guitar string, and it moved, popping up. There was a rumble beneath Marlowe's feet, like continents were shifting deep beneath the surface. Something sharp stabbed him in the side of his head, as if he'd been bitten, and he slapped a hand to his temple. That is normal, said Seth, especially for the first time the engine is cheated. It doesn't like it, not one bit. What's happening? He grunted. This display is connected to the actual engine, to each and every filament. If they change position here, they change position inside the engine. So that's it then, Marlowe asked. My contract's broken. Seth laughed again, but his eyes were full of a profound sadness. If it were that easy, then I would have had 3 fewer heart attacks and my hair would still be the same colour as my eyebrows, he said, shaking his head. No, that is most certainly not it. Tim was swiping at the floor, faster now, giving the illusion that they were all sailing down a river of light. There, the 18th, he said, and they flicked another filament. Something burrowed into Marlowe's skull again, and he winced. If the 18th is gone, then we'd better check out 36 too. Every contract is different, said Seth. Some involve perhaps several thousand filaments. More complicated contracts, such as Pan's last deal, have a total of hundreds of thousands. The more you wish for, the harder it is to locate and repair the filaments. To make it more complicated still, the filaments correspond to the individual. 2 people wishing for the same thing would have a very different contract. Somebody of more advanced years, such as me, would unfortunately have a contract involving 1,000,000 filaments, which is why old farts cannot make a deal. And when too many people have a contract at one time, it becomes too muddled, impossible to differentiate, which is why we do not have an army at our disposal. Come, Marlowe, we must leave them to their work. Tim and Annie burrowed their way deeper into the holographic engine, shouting to each other as they navigated his contract. It looked almost as if they were playing some high-tech sport. Virtual tennis. Only the prize they were playing for was his soul. He jogged after Seth, pulling the elevator gates shut behind him. How long does it take them? He asked as they rumbled upwards. For this? Not long. Several hours. It could be longer. Seth saw Marlowe's expression of disbelief. Remember, the engine does not want you to beat it. The contracts are designed to be unbreakable. It is only because of the technology we possess that we even stand a chance. The mathematics here, the equations involved in breaking the simplest of contracts, they are mind-boggling. Some contracts take the full 27 days to crack. Couldn't you just, make a contract to know how to break a contract? Marlowe asked, feeling like a genius himself for even suggesting it. Seth shook his head as the elevator came to a halt. We tried it, he said sadly. The engine knew we would. It was an impossible contract to break. We lost an engineer. Right here. Would you, please? My strength is not what it was. Marlowe opened the gates and Seth stepped out, walking to the 3rd door along the corridor. This is where you will sleep, he said. It is not a 5-star hotel, I am afraid, but it is comfortable. You should rest. If you do not feel tired, then by all means use our gymnasium, or sit in the recreation room. But whatever you do, please stay inside the complex. The engine is powerful, but secrecy is our most important weapon. The fewer people who know about us, the less likely it is that the Circle will discover our location. We fly far beneath the radar, so close to the ground that our bellies are scratched by the trees. Seriously, Marlowe said, raising an eyebrow. Since I've met you guys, you've blown up a hospital, you've taken out half a block in the city of 8 million people. You don't so much fly under the radar as blow the hell out of it. Seth hissed out a dry wheeze of a laugh. Nothing to do with us, he said, waving a hand and winking. The events you talk of are terrorist attacks, gas explosions, terrible car accidents, catastrophic and tragic building collapses, mid-air collisions, riots, and stampedes. These are the events that make the news, yes? And surely the news does not lie. But enough, Marlowe. I must go, or you will be carrying me to my bed. Just remember, do not leave this place. He shuffled away to another door. Thank you, Seth, Marlowe called after him. The old man waved, then disappeared, the door closing behind him. Marlowe stood there for a moment. He was tired, no doubt about it. He didn't think he'd ever been so tired, but he knew there was no way he could sleep. Not now, not with so much power inside him. He set off towards the gym, wanting to test himself, wanting to see exactly what he was capable of. He was halfway there when Bullwinkle stepped out of the door, wiping his sweating face with a towel. They both almost jumped out of their skins when they saw each other, and Marlowe was the first to recover. "Not so tough now, eh?" he said. Bullwinkle straightened, but he looked afraid. The guy was under contract. Marlowe's arms still ached from where he'd been held by phantom telekinetic fingers. But he knew that if he punched him now, the way he punched Hansen downstairs, he could tear him in two. The thought made him feel sick, and he unclenched a fist he didn't even know he'd made. Bullwinkle saw it, and he took a step forward, lobbing the towel back into the gym. "You shouldn't be out wandering the corridors, mutt," he said. "Isn't it past your bedtime?" "Isn't it past yours?" Marlowe replied. He knew it was probably the lamest comeback that had ever been uttered, but he'd been too tired to think of anything else. "You'd better be in the dorm before Hansen catches you," Bullwinkle said. "There are rules. You shouldn't be pissing around out here. What were you trying to do? Find Pan's bed?" "I wasn't. I'm telling you to go to your doom. I'm telling you to go to your dorm, rookie," Bullwinkle said. "You understand me? That's a direct order." Bullwinkle walked past, barging Marlowe with his shoulder. Marlowe stood firm, and the big guy bounced off, grunting. "Disobey me and you'll have Hansen to answer to," he grumbled as he walked into the shower room. "And give up. Pan doesn't want you." Marlowe heard the rush of water from inside. He sighed and took a couple of steps towards the gym. Then he stopped. He'd rather eat his own crap than take it from Bullwinkle and his eyeless freak of a boss. Besides, Bullwinkle was right. It would do him good to get away from Pan for a while, to try to fill his head with something else. He turned and walked back to the elevator, quietly shutting the gates before pressing the button for the top floor, the way out. Time to have some fun. And the next chapter is called Double, Double, Double Crap. Pan wanted nothing more than to be able to sleep, but Marlowe was making that impossible. He was the only thing in her head, invading every thought. She tried to fight it, but he was a tick burrowing into her skull, impossible to dislodge. She thought about how annoying he was. Oh, how beautiful he looks when he smiles. She tasted his breath, a hint of vomit from when she'd kissed him. Oh, but his lips are so soft, so warm. She tried to focus on all the negatives, on how much she hated him, but then she'd see him there, grinning at her, moving in for another kiss, and she felt her heart melt into a warm, gooey mess, her stomach doing loop-the-loops. Oh, she cursed, turning onto her side. She knew it wasn't really Marlowe's fault. Oh, nothing could be his fault. He's perfect. Oh, God, shut up, brain. It was Hansen. He'd known exactly what he was doing, planting that image in Marlowe's head right before he went into the tank. He'd done it before, the first time Truck had brokered a contract, although luckily Truck was of another persuasion, and it hadn't worked. Hansen was just an asshole, but he was one of Ostheim's favourite engineers, so there wasn't a damn thing any of them could do about it. Except Marlowe. He stood up to him, punched him in the face. So brave, so strong. "Ah!" she growled, pulling the pillow over her head. Marlowe stared back at her from the darkness, moving in for a kiss, and her mouth was open, ready. She threw the covers off and sat up, her heart drumming, her skin cool with sweat. "Oh, God damn it!" "Silencio!" said Knight from the other side of the dorm. "Some of us need our beauty sleep." I don't know why I did that in Seth's accent, sorry. I can't do a Spanish accent. "Silencio!" said Knight from the other side of the dorm. "Some of us need our beauty sleep." Pan crashed back down, thumping her fist against her forehead to try and knock out the Marlowe images. She knew it was just the engine messing with her thoughts, but it felt so real. She loved him. She wanted to shout it from the rooftops. "I love Marlowe Green." But it couldn't be true because she'd sworn never to fall in love, never to give anyone that power over her. Not again. Not after what had happened last time. She saw him now. The guy she'd met when she'd been taken into foster care. The guy who told her she was special. Told her he wanted her more than anything else in the world. Wanted to own every little piece of her. And she'd believed him. Right up to the point he tried to take those little pieces for himself. She'd just turned 13, and she hadn't even known she was capable of violence until that point. Until she'd snatched up the only thing she could find, a cast iron lamp by her bed, and beaten him to death with it. I'd forgotten about that. It's a bit brutal. If only Marlowe had been there, he'd have saved you. "Oh, shut up," she told her head, the rush of emotions, love, hate, churning inside her stomach, making her feel sick. No, she was never going to put herself in that position again. The day Herc had marched into her holding cell, the day he'd given her a choice about who she wanted to be, was the last time she would ever let anyone else control her head, her heart, or any other part of her. Apart from them, of course, Herc and Ostheim. She wasn't stupid. She knew they'd manipulated her. That's what Herc did. Pick the troubled kids, the ones in care, the ones who'd been kicked out of school, the ones shivering inside a cell. She knew why, too. These were the guys who had nothing to lose, the ones who'd run right out of choices. Marlowe fit the bill perfectly. They'd run a background check while he was out cold in the Manhattan Tower. Minor criminal record, just been expelled. He was a model candidate for an engineer. Herc would have recruited him on the spot if he hadn't wanted him to escape, to become bait. Oh, but thank God he did recruit him. Otherwise I wouldn't be in the same building as him now. Wouldn't be so close to him. Wouldn't be able to sneak out of my room right now and find him. Ah, you traitor, she whispered to her brain. He was cute though, Marlowe. Too young for her, obviously, and annoying as all hell, and his breath stank, and he was a pretty awful kisser, and his hair was truly atrocious. She sat up again, probing her thoughts, picturing Marlowe. She screwed up her face, nothing there but distaste. "Oh, thank God," she said, scrubbing her lips with the back of her hand, a sour taste on her tongue. The lawyers must have cracked this part of Marlowe's contract. Maybe now she'd finally be able to get some rest. She closed her eyes, her thoughts blissfully empty, sleep wrapping itself around her like a warm, comfortable blanket. The alarm ripped its way through the beginning of a dream, and Pan shot up, her heart just about catapulting through her throat. Night was already out of bed, a blur as she bolted to the door. Pan struggled into her pants, buttoning them as she went. It was rare that the alarm went off, but not unheard of. Usually it was a contract that was nearing expiration and needed emergency work. Other times it was just a drill. Plus Herc had set it off at least twice trying to smoke a secret cigarette in the toilet. He was there now, standing outside his room, looking like somebody had just dragged him from his grave. "No rest for the wicked," he mumbled, rubbing at his stubble. "Any idea?" She shook her head, running to the elevator, bundling in alongside Herc and Knight and Hope. It was an uncomfortable ride down to the bear pit, and when she opened the gates she saw Hanson there, wearing a new pair of sunglasses. He looked pissed, and he jabbed a hand at Herc. "You happen to know where your latest mongrel is?" he said. "Oh, crap." "Herc, you have Marlowe, right?" blasted a voice from hidden speakers. Pan straightened to attention when she recognised Ostheim's accent. "Tell me he's inside the complex." "Oh, he's inside the complex," Herc said. "No, Herc, he's not," said Ostheim. "He breached the door." Oh, double crap, thought Pan. Herc stormed across the room to one of the monitors. It was the security feed from outside the door, but it wasn't the courtyard entrance. A streak of light burned across the image. Just a second. "Again," Hanson said. "Slower." The clip replayed at a fraction of the speed, and Pan saw Marlowe running across the street, a goofy grin plastered over his face. The tape ran on, and Pan saw Marlowe reappear next to Hanson's shiny blue BMW, the same one he kept in every city connected to the Red Door. He looked like he was scratching something into the hood with a rock. "What is that?" Pan said. "Looks like a rocket ship." "Why the hell wasn't anyone watching him?" Hanson said. "I left him with Seth," Pan said. That old git wouldn't know where to find a turd if he just laid it," Hanson said. "Jesus Christ, Herc. This is a total cluster for keep your knickers on." Herc interrupted. "We'll just go get him." "Oh, you better make it fast," said Ostheim. "And I mean fast, Herc." "Why?" he said. "What's all the hurry? All he can do is mess around for a bit. How much damage can he do?" Hanson sucked his teeth, pointing at another monitor. It was filled with data, the type used to identify fluctuations in the code, and at that moment, it was going wild. Herc stared at it for a second and turned 3 shades paler. "Because we've got engineers in the city, Herc," said Ostheim. "Enemy engineers." "In Prague?" Pan asked. "The door didn't let him out in Prague," said Hanson. "It jumped him in Budapest. That's where we're watching him." Oh, double crap. "Oh, for the love of," Herc said, his cheeks blazing. "So there are engineers in Prague, right?" "No, Herc," said Ostheim. "Wake up. They're in Budapest, 500 clicks from Prague. And if they get to your boy before we do, then he could lead them right back here." Double crap. I can't remember if Ostheim had an accent. I think it's probably exactly the same accent as Seth's, which is quite... I can only really do one accent, so I think it'll get confusing. So sorry if he had an accent before and not this time. Next chapter is called "How the Hell Did We Get to Budapest?" This is awesome. Marlowe couldn't stop grinning as he ran into the night. He didn't feel like he was going particularly fast, but as soon as he started to run, everything else dissolved into slow motion. The raindrops falling from the sky became almost stationary, defying gravity, hanging like jewelled ornaments. Cars slowed from silver bullets to snails, slow enough that he could climb over their hoods, could look in through the windshields and see the drivers, oblivious to him. Every time he ran, a shockwave rippled out from him like a gunshot, kicking up dust and dirt and making windows rattle in their frames. "I want to run faster than sound," he'd asked, and the engine had given him what he wanted. There weren't many people out at this time of night, in this weather, and to those who'd braved the streets, Marlowe was a ghost. He ran up to them, the slow motion world only starting to spin again when he stopped. It must have looked like it appeared out of nowhere, because they always jumped back, screaming, scared out of their skins. Then he'd bolt, and the world would grind to a halt, turning the people into statues with startled faces. He laughed at the sheer joy of it, the impossibility of it, as he broke into a run once again. He had no idea where he was. He hadn't emerged in the same courtyard he'd entered through, but rather on a quiet road facing a river. He'd had a sack over his head en route to the engine, so none of the streets were familiar, but he didn't care where he was going. It just felt so good to be moving, to be the fastest thing in the night. He sped around a corner, dodging a slow-moving couple and careening across a cobbled street. He slipped on the wet asphalt, momentum throwing him towards a parked car. He reached out to stop himself, and his hand left a crater in the metal side panel of the vehicle, the window glass shattering. The vehicle rocked hard on its suspension, the alarm sounding like it was drenched in syrup, slow and deep until time pinged back to normal. "Whoa!" He looked at the dent in the car, then back across the road to the startled couple. They stared back, jaws almost on the floor, eyes bulging, trying to figure out what had happened. Marlowe ran, everything blurring, stretching, like he was entering warp speed. He crossed the street in a heartbeat and stopped again, seeing the couple stagger away, shouting to each other in shock. In their eyes, he must have just blinked out of existence. He left them to it, sprinting down the street over a moving car. He kept thinking they'd have to stop soon, kept reaching down into his pocket to make sure his inhaler was still there, but his lungs were working at what felt like 200% of their capacity, like somebody had ripped them out and replaced them with a carburettor. He sped up, just a blur, as he crossed onto the sidewalk and wove his way between the streetlights. He couldn't remember a single time in his life, not one moment where he felt this exhilarated, this free. Every time he opened his mouth, the laughter spilled out, cool and golden. He couldn't remember the last time he'd laughed like this either. It felt like it might never have happened before. He ran through a group of guys, all of them drunk, specks of their spittle hanging in the air like dewdrops. He was close enough to one that he grabbed the bottle of beer from his hand, zipping around the corner before slowing. He peeked back, seeing the man lift his hand to his face, the moment he realised his drink had gone. The confusion as he studied his hands and the concrete behind him. Marlowe collapsed against the wall, snorting with laughter. The beer was cool in his hand, and he lifted it to his lips. The smell hit him hard, made him think of his mum, sitting at home, cradling her Bacardi. It was a world away from this moment, tearing through the streets, faster than time. He pulled back his arm and lobbed the bottle down the street, watching it spin in a perfect arc, dropping earthward. Then he ran, catching up with it in an instant, snatching it out of the air. Man, if he could keep these powers, he'd be a millionaire, a football star, the only person ever to play as a quarterback and a wide receiver on the same team, for the same pass. He slam-dunked the bottle and darted into a park, sprinting between the trees, leaves dancing weightlessly in his wake. Taking a deep breath, he jumped onto the roof of a van, using it like a springboard, crossing the whole street in one bound before crunching down on the opposite side. Facing him was a hill covered in green. He bounded up a set of stone stairs, climbing, feeling like he was scaling a mountain, feeling like he was running right into the heavens. Only when he ran out of stairs did he collapse onto his ass, out of breath, but not in the clutching his throat, feeling like he was about to die kind of way that he was used to. He had no idea where he was, but a city was laid out beneath him, studded with a light, a fat, lazy, moon-drenched river splitting it in two. He sat there for a moment, the cool, fresh air rushing into his lungs like they were bellows. This was insane. Totally insane. It couldn't be real. But he could smell the city, dust and grease and the faint aroma of the river. The warm touch of a summer night prickled his skin. The stone beneath him was cool and damp. The air was full of distant engines, a siren and the hesitant chatter of the first birds who dared break the silence of the night. It was real. It was all perfectly, beautifully real. Marlowe? The voice came from nowhere, and his scream lodged in his throat like a fishbone. He jumped up, Just trees behind him, the darkness in between them so profound that nothing might have been there at all, like you could step between those trunks and find yourself obliterated from existence. "Who's there?" he asked. Probably Herc or Truck, right? Come to bring him back. Maybe it was Pan. Maybe she missed him. "Marlowe, don't run. Please." He suddenly recognised the voice, but it couldn't be. "Charlie?" he asked. The foliage rustled, a shape gliding from the gloom 20 yards away. Charlie stepped into a pocket of moonlight, looking like a ghost. His clothes were torn, his face pale and smudged with bruises and blood. His nose was bent at a strange angle, like it had been broken. Marlowe moved towards him, but Charlie held up his hands, a set of handcuffs rattling. "Don't," Charlie said, sounding like he was chewing toffee. "Please, if you move, they'll kill me." Marlowe's heart went into overdrive. He looked to the side, trying to make sense of the darkness between the trees. "Who? Charlie?" Somebody else emerged from the shadows, treading carefully, keeping Charlie between himself and Marlowe. It was the guy from the school, Patrick. "Who do you think?" he said. "You figure we'd just pack up and go home? I told you I'd come for you." Patrick wrapped a fist around Charlie's throat, squeezing. Charlie struggled. "Let him go," Marlowe said, taking a step forward, ready to run at them. He was fast now. He could reach Charlie. And knock Patrick's head off with a single punch. But before he could take another step, a third figure strolled from the trees. It was a young woman dressed all in black, like a cat burglar. She had red hair, and she brushed it out of her eyes with one hand. In the other, she was holding a pistol, pointed right at Charlie's head. "You're fast," she said. "We've been chasing you all over the city, but you're not faster than a bullet. Go for me and Patrick snaps your friend's neck. Go for him, and I pull the trigger." "They will," said Charlie. "They beat the crap out of me trying to find out where you went." "But you didn't know," Marlowe said. "I didn't tell you." "No, you left me." "I wanted to protect you," Marlowe said, trying to ignore Charlie's bitter smile. "Yeah, Marlowe, that worked out great, thanks." "So how did you know we were in Prague?" Marlowe asked. "Prague?" Charlie gasped for air. "This is Budapest." "How the hell did we end up in Budapest?" Marlowe thought. "You've got one chance to save your friend's life," said Patrick, lifting Charlie off the ground. Charlie kicked at the air like a hanged man, battling pathetically at the vice-like grip around his throat. "Where's the engine?" "I don't know what..." "You've seen it," said the girl. "You've used it. Where is it?" "I don't know," Marlowe said. "Please, I don't... They put a bag over my head. They wouldn't let me see." "And what about tonight?" Patrick said, lifting Charlie higher. "Where's the door?" Marlowe desperately thought back, seeing a street, cars, a river. He'd been running so fast that he hadn't been paying any attention to where he was or where he was going. No idea. It was just a street," he said. But the door, it's red, like bright red. That's all I know, I promise." Patrick and the girl shared a look. Charlie's face was a mottled shade of purple, his eyes starting to roll back in their sockets. "Do I go? Do I stay?" Marlowe bounced on his heels, the panic like a straitjacket. "Please," he said, "let him go, he's dying." "Like you let my sister go," Patrick said. "How long did you torture her for?" "I didn't. We didn't," Marlowe said, wondering when he'd become a part of the we. "Her contract expired. We never got the chance. She didn't tell us anything. Please." "He's useless to us," said the girl. She put her hand to her ear. "Negative on the new fish. Tell the scouts to search for red doors east of the river." She listened for a second, then nodded. "Disposal authorised." Disposal? She pulled the trigger before Marlowe could so much as blink, the bullet thudding into Charlie's stomach. He groaned, his chained hands dropping to the wound, trying to hold himself in. "No!" Marlowe started to move, but he was too slow. Patrick grinned at him, then pulled back his arm and launched Charlie into the air. His strength was phenomenal, his friend spinning up and over the edge of the hill, a fan of blood trailing after him towards the city below. "That's for Brianna," Patrick said, moving in. "And this is for you." The next chapter is called Freefall. Marlowe watched Charlie spin over the edge of the hill, dropping towards the river. He couldn't let him die, not like this. There was still time. He ran, the world slowing to a crawl, slow enough that he could see droplets of Charlie's blood suspended in the air, almost perfectly still. He'd only taken a few steps before something materialised in the air before him, scraps of bone and skin winding themselves around the rein, flesh knitting itself together until Patrick was standing right there. Marlowe skidded to a halt, ducking beneath Patrick's swinging fist. He managed to straighten in time to see the boy fire off an uppercut. This one connected with his ribs, the force of the punch lifting him off the ground in an explosion of pain. He spun head over heels, landing on his back. Patrick ported again, reappearing right next to him. A gunshot tore through the night, a bullet gouging the rock next to his head. He rolled up, scrabbling into a run as the girl fired off another shot. A slow-motion plume of fire crawled from the barrel of the gun, the bullet sailing out after it, carving a path through the air. Marlowe sensed a shape pop into existence beside him. Patrick right there again, his face feral. Marlowe lashed out, a lucky shot that connected with the boy's chin, catapulting him towards the trees. He didn't stop to see where he'd landed, just turned and ran through the frozen light, a shockwave of sound pulsing out before him like a cannon blast. It was too dark to see much, even with the moon grinning down at him. But wasn't that Charlie there, a silhouette against the city, falling in slow motion? Marlowe propelled himself off the side of the cliff, leapfrogging rocks and railings, almost losing his footing in the dark. He was fast, yes, and strong, but he knew that if he fell here, if he tumbled over the rocks to the streets below, he'd be as dead as any mortal. He slowed a fraction, seeing Charlie's flailing body drop towards the river. He could still reach. Something thumped into his back, as hard and fast as a train, and he tumbled. He rolled down the hill, Patrick next to him, pounding at him with fists of concrete. One connected with his nose, and the world went white, a supernova of light detonating right in the middle of his head. The pain followed almost instantly, an inferno inside his broken nose. He tried to fight back, but they were rolling too fast, bouncing off rocks, their fall out of control. There was a sudden lurch, then nothing at all. No rocks, no steps, just free fall. Marlowe's stomach exploded and he saw the ground rush up at him, a parked car. He landed on the roof, crushing it, groaning as he rolled off. There was a sudden rush of air behind him as Patrick ported onto the street, but Marlowe ignored it, running faster than he'd ever run, the world almost stationary around him. The river was up ahead, a bridge, buildings. Marlowe scoured the sky, no sign of Charlie. Was he too late? Was his friend smeared over a street somewhere? Then there, level with the rooftops, a dark shape dropping. Marlowe leapt over a fence, then onto a car, propelling himself into the river. He prepared himself for the cold, but when his foot hit the water, it was spongy, almost solid. He ran across it, Charlie almost in reach, so close, hanging in the air like a phantom. Marlowe jumped, reaching out for his friend, tackling him in midair. The momentum punched them both towards the riverbank, and they rolled to a halt on the grass. Marlowe snatched in a breath, leaning over his friend. Charlie was in shock, his eyes open but unseeing, blood dripping from his mouth. His t-shirt was drenched, and when Marlowe pulled it back, he saw a gaping hole. He pushed his hands against it, but the blood leaked through his fingers, as hot as boiling water. He was going to die. "Oh, God, Charlie," Marlowe said, tears burning his eyes. "Man, I'm so sorry. I never should have left you." Charlie opened his mouth, but all that came out was a bubble of blood. Marlowe looked around, the windows dark and lifeless, the street empty. He wanted to call for help, but it would bring Patrick much more quickly than an ambulance. He had to carry him, had to get him to a hospital. Marlowe reached down to scoop up his friend, but something big smashed into the grass a couple of yards away, showering him with dirt. It was a bollard, rooted in a half-ton of concrete, rolling past him like a wrecking ball before crunching into the side of a building. He scanned the sky, saw another one sailing across the river like it had been launched by a catapult. Patrick was on the other side, ripping a third bollard from the ground. Marlowe managed to get to his feet, the slab of concrete hurtling right towards him. He threw a punch at it and it exploded into shrapnel, a bolt of pain lancing from his fist to his armpit. He blinked the dust from his eyes, only just managing to get his hands up before the next bollard struck. He caught it, the impact driving him back, his heels gouging trenches in the dirt. He recovered his balance and lobbed the bollard across the river as easy as if it were a beach ball. It was a wild shot, nowhere near its target, thumping him to the side of a bridge with the sound like a church bell. Patrick vanished, reappearing almost instantly on this side of the river. But Marlowe was already running right for him, everything slowing. He slammed into the boy, both of them dropping into the river. Time snapped back, and he hit hard, sinking, the cold like a kick to the gut. Marlowe tried to breathe and inhaled a lungful of freezing water. He kicked upwards, bursting out of the surface in time to see Patrick swing a punch. It connected with his temple, and for an instant there was nothing but black. When the world swam back, he realised he was beneath the water again, hands on his head, pushing him down. Something dark and cold was creeping into the edge of his mind, nothing to do with the river. He choked, lashing out, but the water slowed him down, made it impossible to see where to punch. The hands on his head were squeezing so hard he felt his skull creaking, about to splinter. His vision sparked. He would have screamed if there was anything left in his lungs. Distant pops. Then something streaked through the water like a shaft of sunlight. More followed, one coming so close to Marlowe that he felt a cold burn on his skin. He heard a thud, then the grip on his head came loose. He clawed his way to the surface, snatching in as much air as he could. Patrick was there, clutching his shoulder with one hand, looking like he was struggling to stay afloat. More gunshots, bullets tearing through the water, too close. Marlowe looked towards the bank to see a cop there, an old guy, a pistol in his shaking hands. He was yelling something that Marlowe couldn't make any sense of. He fired again, and Marlowe heard the whistle as the bullet seared the air beside his ear. He swam, trying to make the world speed up again, but he couldn't get his feet on the ground. He couldn't run. Patrick was panicking too tired to port, both of them trying to get to the opposite side of the river. Patrick was hurt though, blood oozing from a wound in his shoulder. The cop was shouting over and over, squeezing off one more round. Then his head erupted into a fan of crimson, and he crumpled to the ground. The girl with red hair dropped casually from the bridge, turning her gun out into the river. "Patrick!" she yelled, barely audible over the rush of water. "Where are you?" "Here!" came a reply from the darkness. "He's that way, by the bridge!" Pop, pop, pop. More bullets tearing into the water. Marlowe snatched in a breath and dived into the murk, paddling manically, the current dragging him along. He was a sitting duck out here. He swam for as long as he could, until he felt the slimy riverbank. Bursting back out, he clung to it, choking, snatching at anything he could to try to root himself in place. A hand. He snatched at it, holding as tight as he could, silently yelling, "Oh, please, please, please pull me up." But there was nothing left inside him. Then Patrick's head appeared above the hand, pale and exhausted, but still smiling. "Beat you," he said. Then he pushed Marlowe back beneath the surface. Oh, should we do one more? Yeah. How are we doing for time? Yeah, we got time for one more. Maybe two. Because it's exciting. This chapter is called Protocol Can Kiss My Ass. Follow the sirens. Sounds like World War III out there. Truck was driving the Defender. Herc in the passenger seat, bellowing out orders. Pan, Knight and Hope were crammed in the back, clutching at each other every time the car skidded around a corner. They didn't have a mobile tracking unit with them, but it wasn't hard to guess where Marlowe was. Gunshots and explosions ringing out from the direction of the river. "Can this piece of crap go any faster?" Herc yelled again. "Come on, Truck, put your fat foot down." They shot across a junction so fast Pan thought they were taking off, narrowly avoiding a police car travelling the other way. It squealed to a halt, its tyres smoking as it spun after them. Truck handbraked around a narrow corner, the SUV demolishing a bus shelter as it bounced off it. Pan could see the bridge, and beyond it the walls of the Capitol building. The whole area was swimming with red and blue lights. At least 6 squad cars parked along the far bank. "Oh, for the love of all things holy," Herc growled. "Could this be any more messed up?" Apparently, it could. A SWAT van was now skidding from a road ahead, accelerating hard towards the chaos. "Oh, take that out," said Herc. Truck stomped on the gas, and they roared up behind the van, pulling alongside it. Truck waved to the startled cops inside, then punched through his window, giving the SWAT vehicle a massive shove. It tipped onto 2 wheels, balanced perfectly for a moment, then crashed down onto its side, the cop car smashing into the back of it. Truck wiggled the wheel until the Defender settled, Pam just about ready to barf up her internal organs. "Oh, we've got to get him fast," Herc said, stating the obvious. "Park it and find him." Truck slammed on the brakes and the SUV skidded to a halt. Pan popped her door and jumped out, seeing the river through a break in the buildings. She didn't have a contract, but she had her crossbow, a fresh load of bolts taken from the armoury inside the pigeon's nest. The cops were mainly on the far side, yelling as they fired randomly into the water. It was too dark to see if there was anything there. She followed the flow, making out a figure a few hundred yards downstream. He was crouched at the water's edge, looking like he was reaching for something. Reaching for something? Or drowning something? She ran, Truck bounding along by her side, grunting like a bear. Night was a streak of light blazing past them, heading right for the shape. The shape must have sensed her coming because he looked around, his face catching the moonlight. It was Patrick. He ported, and Pan hefted her crossbow just in case he appeared right next to her. Truck stormed past, crouching down by the river and fishing for something in the murky flow. A second later he pulled out a limp bag of rags, laying it gently on the path. Pan ran to it, recognising Marlowe. "Is he breathing?" she asked, crouching down beside him. Night appeared, panting, her eyes darting left and right. "Hijo de puta," she said. Pan put her fingers to Marlowe's neck, feeling a faint pulse. "Hold his arms," she said to Truck. He did as he was told, and she slapped Marlowe on his face, hard, then again, and again, until his eyes opened and he vomited water all over himself. He struggled, his unnatural strength matched by Truck's. "Calm down," Pan whispered, "and shut up. We've got to go." "Charlie," Marlowe spluttered. He shook free of Truck's grip to point towards the far bank, the one the cops were lined up on. "Charlie, he's over there. They had him." "What?" Pan stood. This was bad news. There was the crack of a gunshot, closer this time, and Truck suddenly reeled back, clutching his arm. A spray of blood misted over Pan's face, and she gagged, wiping it away. Another shot, a bullet grazing her head. This time she saw the muzzle flash. A red-headed girl on the bridge. "Get her!" Pan yelled, passing Night the crossbow. Night took off, becoming a blur of colour that snaked up the steps and along the walkway. The girl unloaded the rest of her magazine, but Pan knew Night would be too fast, the bullets like paper aeroplanes to her. Night snapped back into real time and levelled the crossbow at the girl's chest. There was a flash as Patrick appeared on the bridge, popping into existence for long enough to grab hold of the girl and port them both away. The crossbow bolt carved through the space where they'd just been and embedded itself into the metal of the bridge. "Ah, damn it!" "You okay?" Pan asked Truck. He nodded, obviously in pain. "Come on, we need to go." "Charlie's over there," said Marlowe. "He's hurt. We have to help him." "No way," said Pan. It was too risky. Too many cops. Marlowe sat up, groggy, saying, "Let me go. I can get him." Marlowe didn't look like he'd be able to fetch a stick, let alone a person. Pan offered him a hand, helping him to his feet. The cops must have spotted Night on the bridge because some were running her way, shouting at her in Hungarian. Somebody fired off a panicked shot and it ricocheted off the railing beside her. She ran, reappearing beside Truck in the blink of an eye. "I saw him," she said, panting. "Your friend, he's over there on the grass. They're trying to help him. Looks like he's hurt bad." "He won't live," said Marlowe. "He's nearly gone. He needs the engine." Pan shook her head. "Please, Pan," Marlowe said. "I don't want him to die. He can't die." "You have to let go," she said. "These things happen." "No," he said, giving her a shove. He must have checked his strength, but it was still like being charged by a bull. She staggered back, watching him go, swearing under her breath. She turned to Night. "Can you grab his friend?" The other girl smiled, handing back the crossbow. "Do you even have to ask?" "Go," Pan said. "I'll get him back to the car." Night became a streak of light, her footsteps drumming across the river, churning up plumes of water behind her. Pan ran after Marlowe, grabbing him. "We'll fetch Charlie. You come with me." An engine growled, the SUV gunning around the corner and up onto the grass. Herc's face grimaced behind the wheel as he squealed to a halt beside them. Pan wrenched open the door, ducking when she heard another shot, something pinging off the roof of the car. She wasn't sure if it was the cops or the redhead, and she wasn't interested in finding out. "Get in!" she yelled at Marlowe. He looked like he was about to argue, and she raised her foot, booting him in the ass and sending him tumbling into the rear footwell. She climbed in after him, the vehicle groaning as Truck got in too. "Where's Night?" Herc asked, the SUV tinkling as bullets tore into it. Pan ducked down, cradling her head as chunks of glass rained down into her hair. "Just drive!" she screamed at Herc. He slammed his foot on the gas and they lurched forward, the car rocking as they bounced over a flower bed and through a barrier. They swerved around a corner and Herc pulled on the handbrake, bringing them to a halt. He looked back. "Where's—" Something hammered on the window, making them all jump. Night looked exhausted, holding Charlie by the scruff of the neck. Pan reached over Truck and opened the door, and together they wrestled the boy in. He already looked dead, drenched in blood and encrusted with dirt. He took a pounding on the way. "Sorry," Night said, as Herc floored it again, the acceleration pushing everyone back into their seats. "He was too heavy for me to carry, so I had to drag him." That obviously hadn't helped. The boy's clothes turned to shreds, the skin beneath ripped and raw. Pan tried for a pulse, didn't find one, tried again, found something fluttering in his neck, as weak as a butterfly's wings. Marlowe pulled his friend's head onto his lap, weeping openly. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, he sobbed. Then, to Pan, he said, oh, we can save him. We just need to get him to the engine. She opened her mouth to argue, then snapped it shut. It was a moot point anyway. The odds were the boy would be stone cold dead before they got there. Herc must have thought the same because he leaned back, yelling over the roar of the engine. We'll do what we can with him, but we can't go straight back. It might be a trap. They might be following us. There's protocol to follow. They screeched around a corner onto a wider road, the sound of gunfire fading. Your choice, kid. You want to drop him off at a hospital, or you want to hold on to him? Pan sat back, grateful that the call wasn't hers. It's why she didn't like to make friends, why she tried to keep her emotional distance from Truck and Knight and the others. In this line of work, sooner or later, your friends got shot, or stabbed, or pulled to pieces. How many had she already lost? She didn't have enough fingers to count them, but she'd already filled too many pages of the book of dead engineers. Marlowe had his hands over the gaping wound in Charlie's stomach. The blood had slowed to a trickle, but there were other things coming out, the car full of the sickening smell of ruptured intestines. Please, said Marlowe, his expression so full of love, so full of fear that something began to swell in Pan's throat. She turned to face the broken window, the wind whipping at her hair, at her face, drying the tears before they could fall. The engine can save him, right? He said. He can wish for his injuries to heal. Right, Pan? We'll do what we can, Marlowe, said Herc. Just keep him breathing. They were on a highway of some kind now, Herc keeping them at a steady 80, weaving in and out between the other cars on the road. Pan could hear sirens, but they were distant, over to the east where the molten dawn was just starting to spill over the horizon. Hang in there, Charlie, said Marlowe, holding the boy's hand, his thumb stroking gently. There was blood everywhere. 2 police cars blazed past on the other side of the road, but they didn't look over, they didn't slow. Is everyone else okay? Herc asked, easing off the gas. Hello, said Truck. He had his hand to his shoulder, but there was just a trickle of blood. I got shot. Oh, shut up, Truck, said Pan. You probably didn't even feel it through all that blubber. Anyway, your contract will patch you up. I'll have you know it stings, he grumbled, poking at the wound with a giant finger. A little bit. It might get infected. Pan and Knight rolled their eyes at each other. Herc was speaking again, but he must have had Ostein on the line. Yeah, we recovered the lost dog. He's okay. 2 enemy agents, possibly more. He looked into the rearview mirror. Nothing obvious, but they might be tailing us from the sky. No way of knowing. Yeah, okay, let me know, boss. Oh, and we recovered another lost puppy. Puppy? Puppy. Hurt bag. Can't speak. Another lost puppy. Hurt bag. Hurt bad. Requesting directions. Start this paragraph again. Yeah, we recovered the lost dog. He's okay. 2 enemy agents, possibly more. He looked into the rearview mirror. Nothing obvious, but they might be tailing us from the sky. No way of knowing. Yeah, okay, let me know, boss. Oh, and we recovered another lost puppy. Hurt bad. Requesting directives. Yeah, they pretty much finished him off. Left him to die. They passed a freeway sign and Herc slowed, squinting at it. He pulled off at the next exit, heading down the ramp. Pan looked back. No headlights following them. Patrick might have chased them for a while, but this was too far for anyone to port. He'd blitz himself right out of existence. Your decision, Ostein, Herc said. Then he nodded, sighing loudly, and he killed the call. Hansen's going to meet us about a mile away, and we'll zigzag back to the nest. Looks like we're clear, though. That easy? Truck said. Not like them to give up a chance to find the engine, to pop one of us. They didn't give up the chance, said Pam. They shot you. They nearly drowned Marlowe. If we'd got there 1 minute later, we'd be dragging him home in a body bag. At least I'd have gotten out my contract, said Marlowe, hissing a laugh through his nose. Pan frowned at him. Oh. Whoops. Yeah, I might have forgotten to mention something, she said. Dying doesn't release you from your contract. If you die, they come to collect you. Sorry. She wasn't sure if the look he gave her made her want to laugh or cry. He shook his head in disgust, looked back at his friend, stroking his hair. And once again she was grateful that she had no friends, no family, nobody to love. Because wasn't that one of the indelible truths of life? If you love someone, sooner or later they end up bleeding out in the back of a car while you drive away from demons. Or maybe that was just her life. She turned to the window, not laughing, not crying, not anything. just watching the world slowly turning from black and white to colour as the sun seared its way through the dying night. And what do you reckon? There's only one chapter left before the third part. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow. I don't know. There's only 80 pages left. We've raced through this. Go on, let's just read it. We're here. We're comfortable. I do need a drink of water, though. I didn't bring one today. Or a cup of tea. Your mission, if you choose to accept it. Marlowe paced back and forth in the dorm, utterly exhausted. His head was a storm of dark clouds, thick with fog. He couldn't sleep, though, not until he knew Charlie was okay. Not until he knew that he hadn't murdered him. He checked his watch. No time there, just those numerals. 659, 34, 15, 52. The power of the engine still thrummed inside him, but it no longer felt good. It felt more like a poison. Something slipped into his drink. A toxin that would take 27 days to turn his insides to rot. He wanted to snatch up a knife and drain his tainted blood. His skin was raw where he'd scratched at himself, like he could scour away the stench of the machine. It was hopeless, though. It was inside every cell, every fibre of his being. It was inside his soul. He walked back and forth, his feet drumming on the floor. Truck was asleep in the far corner of the room, his snores and snorts sounding like drum and bass through a subwoofer. It had taken them hours to get back, zigzagging across half of Budapest before Herc was confident they weren't being trailed. They'd entered the nest through a red door that was identical to the one in Prague, literally identical. It was the same door. This one had been set into a section of the ancient city wall, but it still made Marlowe's guts feel like they were being tumble-dried as he stepped through. Marlowe wasn't sure where the others were now. He hadn't exactly been Mr. Popular on his return, but he knew they'd taken Charlie down to the engine. Hansen had thrown a hissy fit, but he'd been overruled. Not that there was much point, of course. Charlie had been unconscious for the last 30 minutes of the journey, and, as Pan had pointed out, the engine didn't work unless you were awake. "Come on, Charlie," he said. "Please be okay." He sat on his bed, chewing his knuckles. He'd spent over an hour in the shower, most of which curled up beneath the spray, sobbing his eyes out. But he could still smell blood on his hands. He pushed himself to his feet again, pacing like a caged animal. That wasn't too far from the truth, he supposed. He'd been ordered not to leave the room. Truck had been left to watch over him, and Marlowe supposed he could sneak out now, just run for it. He was faster than sound, after all. But where would he go? And who would he get killed this time? No. Better he just stayed here. That way nothing else would turn to crap. Truck farted extravagantly, rolling over in his sleep, muttering something about a monkey. The bullet that had struck the big guy had gone straight through, in and out. And he'd been patched up. It was already close to healing, the contract seeing to that. The sound of footsteps rose up outside and the dorm door opened. He was hoping to see Pan, but it was Hansen who entered. He strode forward, holding a cell phone. "How's he doing?" Marlowe asked. "Do I look like I care?" Hansen said. "He never should have been allowed in. For all we know, he could be working for them." Marlowe scoffed. "Yeah, sure, and I'm Hugh Hefner's jockstrap. Please, tell me how he is." "I take it you're the one who gouged a rocket on my pretty little BMW." "Me?" said Marlowe. "No way, man. I'd never deface something that belonged to such a nice guy. Anyway, looked like a penis to me." Hansen squared up, close enough for Marlowe to see those gaping sockets behind the tinted lenses. He smelled of something sweet, too sweet, like fruit that had started to rot. "You know how long I've been doing this?" he said. "Over 40 years. Marlowe frowned. There was no way he could be that old. He looked like he was still in his 20s. Haggard, yes, but young. "I've seen more people die than you could imagine. Friends, enemies, doesn't matter. Death is death. And I do what I do because it matters. But we save more lives than we destroy. If it wasn't for us, this world would be hell, literally. You have no bloody idea how stupid you were tonight, leaving the complex. If you knew the danger you put us in, if you knew what was at stake, you'd put a gun to your head right now and blow your brains out." Marlowe knew the Brit was right, but he still felt his hackles rise, felt the fury pounding in his stomach, like something trying to claw its way out. He shrugged, like he didn't have a care in the world. "Maybe you should put some windows in then," he said, hating himself for it, but unable to stop the words spinning out of his mouth. "Get an Xbox or something. It's boring as all hell in here." Hansen ignored Marlowe. and shoved the phone at him. Ostein wants to speak with you. Marlowe took the call. Took the cell, sorry. He wasn't sure if he wanted to speak to the man. He knew he'd only get another shellacking. Hansen walked out the door, turning back to say, "And dog, don't talk to him like you talk to the rest of us. He will end you." Marlowe swallowed, waiting for the sound of footsteps to fade before lifting the phone. For a second he thought the call must have dropped because there was no sound there, not even the static hum of background noise. There was just a profound silence, like he'd gone deaf in one ear. He flexed his jaw, the deafness seeming to spread into his skull, making the side of his head feel numb. "Marlowe," said a voice, and he almost screamed. It sounded like the man was inside the room, whispering. His voice was high-pitched. "Marlowe." High-pitched, his accent unfamiliar, European. The silence dropped back over him like a weight, and Marlowe opened his mouth to reply, only so he wouldn't feel smothered by it. "Hi," he said, his own voice so weak, so insignificant. He coughed, speaking louder. "Ostein, right?" "At your service," said Ostein. "And call me Sheppel, please. It's nice to finally meet you. I hear you almost got us all in a heap of trouble tonight." "It wasn't my fault," Marlowe said. "I didn't know I wasn't supposed to leave the nest." The lie seemed to hang in the air like a bad smell, and he paced away so that he wouldn't have to breathe it back in. "Look, All's well that ends well," Ostein interrupted. "Truth is, there's no real danger. It's just protocol. They can't get inside our engine. We can't get inside theirs. They only open from the inside. It's just a dance we do, each side trying to weaken the other. Do you know what a war of attrition is?" Marlowe shook his head, and Ostein must have guessed. "It's a prolonged period of conflict where each side gradually seeks to wear out their enemy through a series of small-scale actions. In other words, it's tit for tat. We kill one of yours, you kill one of ours, over and over and over. For a long, long time, Marlowe. For hundreds of years. Two of the most powerful machines ever created, and we use them to slap each other around the face." "But why?" Marlowe asked. "Why don't you work together? Man, you could rule the world. You could be like rich and stuff. You could be the most powerful people on the planet. I don't know. I don't get it." "Power and riches. You sound like them, Marlowe. Is that what you want?" "Duh," he almost said, but he bit his tongue. Ostein's voice was quiet, gentle, almost soothing, but there was something there right beneath the surface, something dark and dangerous, like the shark-filled depths of a quiet ocean. "No," Marlowe said. "I mean, it would be cool, but what else is there? What are you fighting for?" "We're fighting for everything. And I mean everything." "The world?" Marlowe asked. "More than that," Ostein said. "Much more. If the Circulus Inferni have their way, then they will open up the gates of hell and fill the world with demons. Do you have any idea how thin the walls are between our worlds? Do you have any idea how close we are to the other side and to what inhabits it? They are there now, all around us. Dimensions separated by the merest fraction of space, the stitches held together by old magic, by the first laws of the universe. All it takes is one snip, and the whole thing will unravel. Demons will flood our world, and we will all be prey." Marlowe rubbed at the goose flesh on his arms, sitting down on his bed. His legs didn't feel quite strong enough to hold him. He pictured it, those things peeling themselves from the walls, from the floor. The world would be an island of sundered flesh in an ocean of blood. "Not just that," said Ostein. "It's not just death that we're talking about. Demons don't care about blood and bone. It's your soul that feeds them. Do you understand, Marlowe? If the gates are open, then every single person on earth will lose their inner self, their essence. They will burn for the rest of time." Marlowe wiped the sweat from his forehead, had to close his eyes against the sudden wave of nausea and vertigo. Every single person. His mum, Charlie, Pan, him. "Do you understand now why it's important to listen?" Ostein asked. "Why we have rules?" "Yes." "Good. But as I said, no harm, no foul. I also heard that you fought well tonight, that you nearly took out an enemy engineer." "No," Marlowe said. "Not unless nearly taking out is the same thing as almost being drowned by. But you're still here to tell the tale, and that's no mean feat when you're fighting somebody like Patrick Rabar. Hurt did well recruiting you. He saw something in you. He saw that you are a brave man, yes?" Marlowe felt his cheeks burn. He stared at the floor. A brave man? No, he was the opposite of that. How many times has he tried to run? Had he tried to run? How many times had he abandoned and betrayed the ones he loved to save his own ass? He was Marlowe Green, and he was a coward. You may not know it, Ostheim said, once more seeming to pick the thoughts right out of Marlowe's head. But it's there inside you, and I need it. I need brave men, Marlowe. Can you help me? I guess. Good. Then we have something I need you to do. A mission. We think we've managed to track Patrick. He's running, but he's hurt. We need you to go after him. Okay, said Marlowe, his pulse drumming in his ears. Pan, Truck, and Knight will be going with you, Marlowe. I don't need to tell you how important this is. If we get to Patrick, then we may have a way into their engine. Okay, Marlowe said. What happens then if we get inside? We destroy it, Ostheim said. We take it to pieces and we sink them at the bottom of the ocean. Then we win, Marlowe said, nodding. Is that what they want to do too? Destroy our engine? No, said Ostheim. They need our engine. If the two engines are united, then they will possess the key to tearing down the barriers between our worlds. A bolt of fear tore through him, followed by a sudden rush of emotion, too powerful to identify. It was almost excitement. Then can't we just, destroy our engine? He said. Stop them from getting it. Ostheim breathed out a laugh, the sound as soft and sharp as a knife through steak. We could, but that would be like giving up your nuclear weapons in the hope that your enemy will do the same. Marlowe nodded, still feeling that itch, that unbearable tickle of excitement in his chest. Ignore that sensation, if you can, said Ostheim. It's easy to forget that this is why the engines were designed, to bring about a union of worlds. Can you hear it? It's what the engine wants you to do. Unite it with the other infernal machine. Do not listen to it, and it will fade. Marlowe could hear it, a soft whisper that seemed to be coming from inside him, scratching at his skull. Go now, Ostheim said. Be brave. Return when your mission is done, and know that you played a part in keeping this world safe. You are an engineer. The fate of this world lies in your hands. Marlowe nodded. He could be brave. He could be brave. Now go see your friend. He's out of the engine and he's still alive, but only just. His fight is far from over, but he is on the right path. Oh, thank you, he said, a wave of cold relief washing over him. But the call had ended, that immense silence cutting out and replaced with the quiet hiss of an empty line. Marlowe kept the phone to his ear for a moment more, then tossed it onto the bed. An engineer. He still had so many questions. There was so much he didn't understand, but at least he had a better idea of his role in the war and what he was fighting for. And at least Charlie was out of the woods. He jogged from the room, out into the corridor. Hansen was waiting inside the elevator and he closed the gates behind Marlowe before pressing the button. What did he say? Hansen asked as they rumbled down. Oh, he told me to tell you that you're fired, Marlowe said. Hansen bristled, but it didn't reply. He just waited for the elevator to come to a halt before opening the gates. Marlowe walked out into a corridor he hadn't had a chance to explore yet. Only one of the doors was open, and he walked towards it, turning into a room that could have belonged inside a hospital. There were 6 medical beds, and in one of them lay his only friend, battered, bruised, and asleep. Oh, Charlie, he said, running to him. He noticed Pan sitting beside the bed. Is he okay? She shrugged. We managed to wake him up with a shot of adrenaline to the heart, Pan said. He was conscious and aware when he went in. He knew what to do. Ask me, it was a stupid move. He could have dealt for anything. What did he deal for? Marlowe asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. Charlie was looking better than the last time he'd seen him, which was one good thing. He still resembled a sculpture of bruises and broken bones, sure, but he was breathing evenly, and the heart monitor that bleeped beside his bedside held a strong rhythm. To stay alive, Pan said. He repeated it back to me a dozen times before we let him in. So why is he still unconscious? I don't know, she sighed. He was right there, on the edge of death. He might have been too close. Bad things can happen when you use the engine to prolong life. He might have been better off dying. Marlowe started to argue, then understood what she was saying. The lawyers can break it, right? He said. She didn't reply. Right? They're looking at the engine now, she said. They're doing their best. This is a tough one to break, and they don't even know if it's all he broke it for. It could be anything. They don't know where to start. Marlowe swore. Not only had he dragged Charlie into this crap storm, not only had he nearly gotten him killed, he'd also damned his soul to hell for all eternity. He took Charlie's hand, the boy's skin cold, clammy, like he was already a corpse. "I'm so sorry," he said. "You spoke to Ostheim?" Pan asked. He nodded. "Then you know we have to go." "I can't leave him, Pam." "There's nothing you can do for him," she said, standing up. "They'll do everything they can." "Just give me 1 sec, okay?" Marlowe asked. Pan nodded and walked out of the room. "I'm going to get a new contract," she said, sighing. "Meet me in the bullpen. Don't be long." Then she was gone. Marlowe held Charlie's hand for a moment more. "Just hang in there, okay?" he whispered, stroking Charlie's hand with his thumb. "I can't do this without you, ma'am. I can't do any of it." He stood, preparing to go, only to feel Charlie's fingers tighten around his own. The boy's eyes were open a crack. He licked his blistered lips, croaked out something that might have been a word or a breath. "What is it, Charlie? You need water? Some morphine or something?" Charlie slowly shook his head, licking his lips, swallowing noisily. He was obviously in a lot of pain, grimacing as he tried to shape the words. "Careful. Be careful, Marlowe," he said. "What?" Marlowe leaned in, so close he could feel the next words against his ear. "Be careful," Charlie said. His eyes had closed, the heart monitor thumping along at a faster rate. "You'll be okay, man," Marlowe said, walking to the door. "I promise you, it will be okay. I'll get the doc." Charlie didn't open his eyes, but his whisper reached Marlowe across the room. "They're lying to you." Ooh. Part 3, When Worlds Collide. We'll crack on with that next time. There's really not long left to go. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. About 70 pages left, so we might finish it in the next 2 sessions, maybe 3. But yeah, I hope you're enjoying that. Sorry this was split into 2 parts. I don't quite know what happened there. And yeah, I hope you have a lovely day, whatever you're doing. My voice has got so hoarse. I'm going to go and get a drink, a cup of tea, and yeah, I will catch up with you soon. Keep raising hell. But, not like actually raising hell. Just like being a bit naughty. But not actually that naughty. Just keep raising hell in a sort of nice, genteel, friendly way. See you soon.